Gotcha. I'll do that. Go ahead. All right, hold on. I'm admitting people and back to you, Troy. Sorry.
That's okay. Can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up if you can see. Okay, great. Thank you, Lee. So use this as a template. And like I said, I'll talk about equipment that I have used myself, but I tend to not use hearsay equipment that, oh, so-and-so said this works great. I don't feel comfortable recommending that to people and then you having a bad experience. But if there's a piece of equipment along the way that you've used or you've heard somebody use, feel free to ask me if I have any experience with it. All right. Okay. Before I forget, because I tend to forget to tell people this. If you have a YouTube channel or you're planning to start live streaming to YouTube, but you've never live streamed to your YouTube account before, you have to activate the live stream feature before you can go live. And sometimes that can take up to 48 hours for YouTube to open that up. So if you're considering streaming to YouTube, now this is different than pre-recording a video and posting it to YouTube. This is if you're literally going to live stream on YouTube. You have to activate that setting. So if you're planning on doing this, that's just do it now and get it out of the way. I learned this the hard way and was sweating profusely early in the pandemic for a client waiting for that to turn on. So I wanted to mention to you that early. It's an easy thing that a lot of people forget. Okay, so what are we doing right now? Like I mentioned earlier, many churches are probably either pre-recording themselves, putting together the whole virtual worship service and posting it online for their congregation to watch. Or a lot of churches are also using their cell phone, a smart device, or laptop to stream from their sanctuary with just that device, meaning they're using the camera and microphone that's built onto any of these devices to capture them and stream to the internet. This is still a really great option for streaming your hybrid services, and it still works great. And there's tons of churches that are still doing that. But how do we make it better? If you're here tonight, you're probably wondering about, we've liked this, it's worked, but we're interested in how do we make that step into the next level? How do we make it look maybe a little bit more polished, a little bit more engaging for our audience? Small additions to your equipment selection, it can make a huge difference. And also too, it makes it easier on everyone involved. If you're the minister of your church and you've been going into the sanctuary each week and recording yourself and trying to do that as a do it yourself holding a live stream, it's a little bit stressful and you're a little bit distracted from yourself trying to provide your sermon and things of that nature. And also too, it improves the quality of your hybrid worship. And I'm going to ask everyone again to please mute your microphone. Okay. All right, so let's get into it. Equipment, what are we going to consider? First thing you want to consider is, if you want to move to that next step, is investing in a camera, okay? And the title of this is Cameras and Stands, because if you're going to do this, you're going to want a stand or a tripod or something for your camera to sit on so you don't have someone trying to hold it during the worship, okay? Now, there's a large variety of what are called conference cameras that can add a variety to your hybrid service. And the nice thing about this is you can start small with literally one camera. And then as this grows, as you see the necessity of maybe adding a secondary camera down the road, it's real easy to add those onto your system as it evolves. So one camera that I have used for live streaming personally for small venues is this device right here, which is called the Hudley Go conference camera. It's $300. What's nice about this camera is that it has the ability through software to zoom in and out when it's filming. Now, it doesn't pan back and forth. It doesn't tilt up and down on, through the controls. It would just be a locked down shot. But if you're a smaller church and you only really need one camera, maybe in a corner. Oh, somebody says they can't see my shared screen. Try it again. Thank you for posting that.
So I can see it, and I'm wondering, everybody else, Paul, Clay, you can see it, Heather, you can see it. Okay, so that was Sarah. Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, Sarah, that you can't see it, but we are recording this. So, and hopefully it'll correct itself in just a moment.
Might it be the slider, that slides on the individual computer to make the people part larger and the
chat.
Yeah.
and the picture smaller? Yeah, there's two little lines that might be at the left side of all the people, and if you scoot that across, it might come out. I don't know, just a guess.
Thanks, Paul.
No, it should still be there.
She's got it. She's got it.
Oh,
Okay.
yay, all right.
Well done.
There we go.
It
Thanks,
takes
everybody.
a village. It takes a village.
And friends, thank you for muting yourselves, right?
Mhm.
And monitoring that. We appreciate that. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah. Oh, please. Yeah, it's my pleasure. So anyway, this camera is really nice. What's nice about this camera is that a local school that I used to teach a class at, when we went back to in-person teaching, they installed these cameras in every one of their classrooms. And this is what we use to live stream from our classrooms, because we had a number of students who stayed at home and did hybrid learning. And what I learned real quickly was this is a really great camera. It has a great picture quality. It just plugs into any device via a USB input. Like I said, it has that ability through a free app you download to control it. You can adjust the focus. You can adjust the brightness. So if you have it on auto brightness and say it's a little bit dark, you can go in and make it brighter or darker depending. And like I said, it has that ability that if you wanted to zoom in a little bit closer or zoom out, you can do it right from the controls of your computer. It's USB-C into the camera and USB-A out. Good question, Bill. And it does come with that cable, by the way. It's not like a lot of cameras where you have to buy the cable separately. It actually comes with the cable. Now, the only drawback to this device is it doesn't have a built-in microphone. You know, iPhones and other things like that, they have an onboard microphone. This device does not have that. Now, it's really great too, because it's very easily integrated into a software application like Open Broadcasting Software or OBS. I'm sure many of you, as you've been researching this, OBS has come up quite a bit. Maybe even some of you have used it and have quite a bit of experience with it. The nice thing about OBS is that any peripheral you plug in, camera, microphone, OBS will instantly recognize that as a usable source. And this camera works great. A little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to show you a live stream I produced using this camera, one external microphone, OBS, and that was it. Just to kind of give you an example of what the capabilities of these pieces of equipment are. And as you grow, as I mentioned earlier, as you grow, you can add more of these cameras as long as you have open USB ports on your computer, okay? That's with OBS, like I said, anything you connect via a USB input, you just have to have an open USB port to plug more things into. But if you do have a device that currently has three open USB ports on your computer or laptop, you have nothing to worry about. Now, earlier today, as I was doing a little bit of research for this, I came across this camera. This is the Mevo Smart Camera. You can see it's a little bit higher price point. However, the camera can be completely controlled by an app on your cell phone. It has a built-in internal microphone, and it also has a jack on the back of it that allows you to plug a microphone into it. You can stream directly from this camera to Facebook, YouTube, whatever you want, directly from that same app. And what's really great about this is you can buy micro SD cards and record your stream on it at the same time. So essentially it's an all-in-one live streaming camera. Now, I will admit, I've never used it. The reviews I saw today were seemed solid, and it seemed kind of an impressive option to consider as you start researching what you want to invest in. Any questions about either one of these cameras so far? Great.
Hey, Heather has a question. Go ahead,
Oh,
Heather.
sure. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I have a question about, does this camera do anything more than zoom in and out?
Now, when I read the reviews of this camera right here today, it did say that it had the ability to optically pan and tilt. I read a little bit about it today, and towards the end of the presentation, I'll actually grab a link to it and post it in the chat, so that way you can click on it and pull it up in a browser and read about it. But
Thanks.
apparently it within the app itself, it has a grid function that you can go in and tap on that'll move the image. I'm not really sure how that all works. Like I said, I was looking for other options to recommend to everyone today. And like I said, I just happened to come across this, and I'm the kind of person that's fine. I love to read stuff on the internet, but I want to have it in my hand and mess with it. So when I explain it to you, I'm like, oh, this is actually how it works. But like I said, a lot of people were commenting on the page I was on looking at it that it was a really good transitional piece from, you know, that step up from using a phone. And what I thought was a nice feature about it was it having the ability to plug a microphone into the back of it. You know, one of the drawbacks about cameras that have an on-camera microphone is, as you've all probably experienced, the farther you get away from it, the worse the audio sounds. So we'll talk about, you know, microphones as opposed to options for investing in those if you don't have a sound system in your church currently. So that would be something that would be nice with this option is, even though it has an onboard microphone, that ability to plug a microphone in and get your microphone source closer to whomever's speaking is a huge advantage.
Hey, Troy, so
Yes.
I don't want to jump ahead, but on these two cameras, are you going to talk about possible placement, whether or not they're mobile or they're mounted or fixed, those kinds of things?
I can real quick. And really, it's one of those things is whatever those goals are you talked about earlier, and we talked a little bit more about last night. What is really nice about these is that all of these cameras we'll look at, all cameras come with like a universal thread piece on the bottom of them, meaning that they will fit onto any tripod, any mic stand, anything of that nature. You probably have an extra mic stand just sitting around the church that's not being used. You can screw these cameras right onto the top of that, and you've already got your stand. And then you can sit it somewhere in your room. So say you're thinking about potentially having one camera in the back of your sanctuary to get a nice, lovely, wide shot of your whole sanctuary. And then you only need one camera for just on the minister when they're delivering their sermon. You could either have someone tilt it manually when it's time for that, or you could have it in a position to where it's wide in the back of the church. And when the minister starts to move up to the pulpit, you use that application and just zoom it right in. I'm going to answer this question from Laura real quick. It's very easy with a micro SD card. All you need is a small little card reader. Best Buy sells them, Amazon sells them. And then you just plug that in to that card reader, plug it in via USB to your computer, and it'll pick it up kind of like a jump drive, and you can just drag and drop those files off of them. It's very simple. Kris, did I get all the questions you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, in yesterday's talk, when we were talking about bigger spaces and bigger churches, you had a drawing of where people could put cameras. And so, you know, those of us in smaller churches now, maybe with a single camera, are thinking, okay, you know, rather than have my brother-in-law hold it during the service in the fourth row, what, you know, how do people deal with these? So the tripod is a great option as people are sorting out position. So go ahead. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Troy.
sure.
I have
Okay.
a question though.
Somebody
Yeah, go
else
ahead.
had a question?
Yeah,
Go
I think
ahead.
it's Deb. Go ahead, Deb.
The question is that even though it may be a small church and you only have the one camera, let's say, either one of the ones you've talked about, is that if it has to be plugged into a USB port, then that means it has to be relatively close to the computer. It can't just be sitting, it can't necessarily be sitting, 15 foot away in the middle of something or towards the back if your computer system is over to one side. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct. And that is one of the drawbacks to that Hudley camera is that, yeah, it physically has to be connected to a computer, to a laptop. But I can tell you this, you can buy extended USB cables to run the distance. So say it's 20 feet that direction where you want your camera versus where your control system is. You can plug that USB into that and chase it across there and plug it in, and it'll totally be fine. That's where that option of that other camera with it doing everything internally and you using the app might be a better resource. It just really depends on what all you're trying to do. And this really becomes the very challenging part of this aspect of is, and I've talked to a lot of churches about this, is you might have a much older church, and running cabling somewhere is almost impossible because there are beams or insulation or things of that nature. Trying to buy multiple things. And Bill, you may be right. And I'll be honest with you, you may be right. I've read articles where they talk about you can go to 20 feet before you start seeing a degradation of video signal. I think it really all depends on the equipment and how lucky you get. With our church, one of the things we ran into is our cameras are set up using SDI cable, which is a professional broadcast cabling. And we tested that limit of run length. And it's one of those things that's just kind of trial and error. But that is one of the tough things, when you're trying to put a system together is like, okay, what are those limitations going to be between what I currently have in place and what I want to add to it and where I want to place my cameras?
And Troy, one of the things that I think for some of us is that we are now transitioning from sort of a casual handheld or tripod camera to probably needing a station, if you will, in the sanctuary on which you can park a laptop, on which you can deal with, whatever else you're going to get, especially if you're going to get a second camera and you need a switcher or you need to access that OBS software. So this is a paradigm shift, I think, too, about thinking about the layout in the congregation, thinking about your power sources. And we have heard from many folks who are still struggling with getting a good, strong signal in their church as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are a lot of things of that nature that come into play with it. And that's why I was saying earlier, it's like you can start to talk about what's one like perfect example of how to do this, but then you may have a situation where Deb was mentioning of, our control center's over here, but we may decide that, man, the camera would look better so much over here. And, you kind of run into that struggle as well. And then how do we address that? How do we troubleshoot that issue as well? Yeah.
That's Heather, that's a really interesting question, because when we think about what we're trying to create for whether it's worship or programming, we want the experience eventually to be interactive. And so I know Troy will be talking about that. We want people to see each other, hear each other, and that too is going to require some forethought. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, I actually have that. I'm glad you asked, Heather. We have that towards the end of the presentation about how to use these new devices and work that together where you can kind of engage with your virtual audience. Okay. So if we're moving forward and we decide we want to use a camera that doesn't have a microphone on it, or it's so far away that we can't hear the person who's speaking. We need a microphone. Now, some churches already have a sound system in their church, maybe a small audio board with a couple of speakers, things of that nature. If you fall into that category, you're all set, because you can run a cable from your audio board directly to whatever's going to control your live stream, and you're fine. But if you don't, which a lot of churches don't, some houses of worship are so small that just the acoustics alone are good enough for everybody to hear. And that's great, but when you're live streaming, you got to have a microphone to hear people, going through to your online audience. So let's look at
till I have to stir something.
Okay. So one of the things, the blessings with microphones is that there are so many out there for you to choose from, and there's easily probably going to be one. Heather, so is that a cable from the soundboard to the laptop where the app is running? Absolutely, that's exactly what it is. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more specifically in just a second, but that's exactly what it is. So with microphones, the blessing, there's loads of options to consider. The struggle can sometimes be which one is the best fit. So you'll need to decide, how many different people do you need to record music from during your worship service? Is it only the minister? Is it the minister and the organ or musician? Is it the minister, the organ, the liturgist? That sort of thing. Do we have the budget for more than one microphone? And if not, then we need something that can potentially capture a good sound quality for everything. So if you only have enough budget out the gate to purchase one microphone, what I recommend is you look at buying is what's called a shotgun or boom microphone. If you look at this picture, you can see that it has a sensor in the front and then little sensors on the side. What's really great about these is they have wonderful audio quality. They have a large reception range, meaning that you can be 15, 20 feet away and it can still pick up the sound. Let's just say that in your house of worship that your current audio board doesn't have that output I was talking about earlier to run out of your audio board and connect it to your live stream computer. But if you've got speakers in your sanctuary, these microphones do a great job of picking up that sound from your speakers good enough for people to hear it during your live stream. I talked to a church 2 days ago. They're going to do that. They're waiting on some more equipment to come in. They went out and purchased one of these microphones just to get them through the next couple of weeks. So that way things that are musicians and things that are playing in their sanctuary can be picked up by this. And what's really nice too is these microphones are extremely versatile. So you can use them for other projects as well. I mean, you can certainly use them for worship, but if you needed to start doing a podcast or if you want to do something like that, you can use them for a lot of different things, and they're great. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. I'm trying to keep up with the chat and with this. Yes, there are shotgun microphones that plug into a USB. So the first microphone I'm going to recommend, because this is the microphone I use professionally. I use this microphone. I've used it for about 10 years. It's phenomenal. And it's the Audio-Technica microphone, and it's $169. It has phenomenal audio quality. It has that large reception range I was talking about. I have used this to film interviews with people, and I also used this to record our organist playing all during the pandemic when I produced our virtual worship services. Now, the only drawback to this microphone is that it uses professional XLR connections. It's your typical microphone. It's kind of what Paul was asking about, does it have a USB? It does not, but they do sell equipment out there that can convert that you plug this into, and then the other side, it changes it into a USB. I mean, that's an extra purchase, but it is an option. Now, another microphone that's out there is this Rode Video Mic NTG. As you can see, it's a little bit more expensive, but this one comes with two different outputs. It comes with that small little like headphone size jack, or what we refer to as the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. So it could actually plug into the old iPhones because they got rid of that on the current ones. But it can also plug into anything using that. And there's also a USB connector as well. This is a good mic. I've used it too. And I was actually surprised today when I looked at it and found that it was more expensive than the Audio Technica, because typically Rode is on the lower end of the price range, but they are good microphones. Now, if you have a little bit more room in your budget, you could go the wireless microphone route, which a lot of churches probably already have incorporated. And what I have here is just an example of the Shure dual channel wireless set. And what that means by dual channel means is that you can connect two different microphones to the receiver and send those into your live streaming equipment. And what's nice about that is that can be any two types of mics. So if you wanted to have one person using a handheld, this goes back to that question earlier. Say you have a live musician that's going to perform, and then the liturgist who's going to read, they could pass that microphone off and on, but then your minister is going to give up and deliver a sermon. They could wear a different microphone or hold another microphone, and that one receiver will work. Typically how that works is you need one transmitter or microphone going to one receiver. A lot of systems now are moving to that dual receiver option where you can connect two different microphones to one device and then come out of that device into your system. I know $549 seems like a lot, and it is, but these are good investments to investigate.
Troy,
Yeah.
we have a hearing loop in our sanctuary. Does any of this microphone stuff need to take that into account, or does it need special equipment or anything?
Hearing loop, you mean for people who have
Hearing aids?
That's a very good question, because we used to have one of those in our church and then we got rid of it.
Troy, but
Yes.
fasten your seatbelt. I actually might be able to answer this question.
I knew you would.
No, so your hearing loop, Karen, and we can talk offline because I owe you a phone call anyway. But the hearing loop system connects into your audio system. So if you are tapping into your audio system, there's a mixer there, and I think everything magically comes together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, we can talk about that offline. And I have a local person who might be able to answer that too, Karen. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. And Chris, that's more of probably what we were talking about last night, that auxiliary output that we talked about last night. It's probably going into that system that Karen was asking about. So it's just getting a direct line. So
Perfect.
More than likely, no, you're not going to have an issue. And the other thing I'll mention about the Shure brand is, as far as microphones, is if you go with their wireless systems, they're really, really easy to set up and configure. Because one of the things with wireless that you probably all know is that you get any kind of interference on a bandwidth channel, you'll get that hissing, that popping, that feedback and things like that. Shure's really good about searching for a signal that's completely clean. So if you have like an assisting sound system in there for people who are hearing impaired, it's going to search for a signal where it doesn't create that crosstalk.
Good.
Okay.
And what is the length of life for microphones? Like, how long do they last? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was trying to think about how to say this. It's just based on how well you treat them.
Yeah.
And that's the best way I can say that. You drop them a lot. If it's got a cable, when you're wrapping your cable up, if you wrap it around like this, you're just going to wear those cabling out, and it's not going to last very long. But if you're really good about, especially with handheld mics, if you're really good about taking batteries out after every worship, keeping them in the soft cases they come with, they can last for years. We have some handheld mics in our sanctuary that are 10 years old and they still work great. And Kristen, I'm so glad you posted that in the chat. I live in a very small town. I mean, even though Evansville is the third largest city in Indiana, we're still a small town. And I talked about this last night. Our church is barely 2 miles from our airport, and we're constantly having to reconfigure our bandwidth for all of our wireless technology because of that cross interference. And that's a great comment to consider. You have to think about that when you're in the area. And one of the things I can advise you on that, Kirsten, you are tremendous for posting this. When you go to look at wireless systems, there'll be bandwidth channels that they'll say, you buy it in bandwidth channels. Research what those bandwidth channels are for that wireless system, and then try to research what is the most used bandwidth area in your area, and then don't get the same. You can look that up online because they'll come in chunks, and sometimes some manufacturers call it group A, B, and C, and they'll give you the frequencies they broadcast in. And as long as you pick an option that's not being heavily used in your area, there's a much better chance of getting that clear connection that you were talking about.
You know, what we're discovering too is that, again, churches are finding they have a greater need than for hardwired solutions, whether it's for internet or it's for microphones, and this is why. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you know, like I said, once we worked through that bandwidth issue, and for the longest time we thought it was, you know, feedback from the speakers. Maybe our minister got behind the speakers or in front of the speakers, and that can cause some squelching, some feedback. We thought it might be her earpiece versus a handheld and that sort of thing. And once we realized, no, it's that crosstalk from the airport, and we retuned everything, it cleared it right up. And some of the newer units are becoming much, much better about not allowing that kind of crosstalk. But yeah, it can be very challenging because everybody gets so frustrated when they get that big squelch sound in the middle of a service. You can just see everybody turn and look at the audio board operator. So microphone brand recommendations. This is a question I get a lot. Troy, what's the best brand of microphone out there? There's a lot. But I'm going to make a list of the 4 microphone brands that I say, if you're going to look at investing in a microphone, these would be one of the 4 names that I would put on your list to do some investigating. Rode, which I said it's great for the price. Sometimes it might have a limitation on its connections, and sometimes the sound quality can be not as good as the others. It's still really good, but if you were like listening to a Rode and a Shure, the Shure is going to have a little bit better sound. Is anybody going to notice? Probably not, but that's the only thing. Audio Technica is wonderful. It's versatile. It's well built, and it's affordable. Sure, they're exceptional microphones, and they come in a variety of sets and kits for any type of use. That's what I was talking about earlier, those wireless kits that they come with. And a lot of times they're on sale. And like I said, you can get a set that might come with, you know, a handheld mic and a wireless mic that somebody might wear. And then Sennheiser, of course, it's considered the top end in any audio market. But I tell you what, over the past couple of years, in my personal opinion, Shure has really bridged that gap as far as quality. And it's kind of like right now, you're just paying a little bit more for the Sennheiser name. Do you have any suggestions for a laptop podcast mics for those who are not going from audio board into the broadcast? Lee, let's talk about that a little bit because you can really use any mic. Are you talking about a mic that are you talking about during a live stream or just for using a podcast?
During the live stream.
During the live stream. I mean, either. Oh, go ahead.
Because we are just doing Zoom because we want maximum flexibility and interactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about 30 to 50 people most.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than going through our audio system, we're pumping we're letting the podcast mic pick up the ambient sound of the room. And then we're running my computer through a mic jack into the system so we can have people leading from Zoom, vice versa.
I got you. Yeah.
And
I
so
got
I'm
you.
curious about the mic I've got right now is a nice little snowball blue, but sometimes we're getting background noise from it. And I'm curious if there's a better option out there. I mean, given I spent $50 total. So, I mean, I'm not complaining, but I'm curious if there's another toy that'll pick that up with that where I can change the width a little bit more and not get as much background and cars drag racing down the front of the church drive on Sundays.
You want a cardioid mic. And what I
Okay.
mean by a cardioid mic is you want to look for a microphone that has a cardioid reception pattern. And essentially what it looks like the shape of a heart. So if your microphone's right here, imagine a heart signal kind of going out. So it picks up a lot of area kind of right here, but then as it moves away, that tapers off. So you lose all that really big ambient sound out there. And I think, because I had someone call me this week, that church I was talking to you about, that just needed a microphone to stopgap between when they get their new microphone system installed. They were using that Snowball Blue mic you were talking about, but the problem they were running into is that the reception area of it wasn't good enough to get the stuff they needed. But when I was on their website, I swear I saw an option that they sold a microphone that did have a cardioid pattern. But look for a microphone that has that, and if you're close enough to it, it's going to pick you up, but eliminate that background noise.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing, Lee.
Well, and that becomes the big struggle, because not too long ago, I bought a wireless mic combo to use for outside field production with my camera. And that becomes kind of the big question. I mean, because those microphones, high-end, high-end audio companies might have, many different microphones that have many different reception patterns. For someone like me who, most of the time I'm using a shotgun mic to record audio, but every once in a while I'm outside and I need that wireless microphone. Picking out that microphone's challenging. And I went with a cardioid mic on this most recent purchase, and I was filming in downtown Indianapolis, right off one of the main roads, someone speaking on camera. There was a fountain over her shoulder. And when I got back to the studio and was listening to it, you can hear the fountain just a little bit, which is what I wanted, but all that road noise was completely gone, and she was 50 feet away from the road. So yeah, so if you get a microphone with that kind of reception pattern, that's what they're specifically designed for. Okay, so let's just say that you decide you're going to go this route, and you're going to maybe buy one or two of those little USB cameras and connect audio to your computer, and you're going to run a live stream service with 2 cameras and a microphone from your church. How are you going to do that? Well, the next step is you're going to need software to live stream your broadcast, and you've probably heard of OBS. Let's talk about that and look at that briefly, or potentially in great detail. So OBS is the gold standard of live streaming. OBS has been around for years. If you've ever watched anybody on YouTube live stream, especially guys who like to live stream video games, this is the software they use to do that live stream. It's open source. And what that means is that it's created by people who work in the industry and use it day in, day out. And they designed it because they wanted a piece of software that really worked. It's free, and it's free to download, and it's free to update. And what's nice about it is that not only can you use those cameras and microphones I talked about earlier that are connected to it, you can also use any graphics or videos that are on your computer as a part of your worship experience as well. So if you have someone who can't be in worship and wants to send you a video of them talking about a moment for mission, you can load that in there and play there. If you want to put the lyrics to your hymns on the screen, you can do that as well. And it's all, you can do all of this from one computer. The only thing with OBS I'll mention is that it has a unique interface, and there's a little bit of a learning curve. But there's tons of tutorials out there, and once you're comfortable with it, it is really easy to use.
Yeah, Sarah made that same comment and you talked about the latency factor.
Yeah, there's the latency, and then there's also the quirky thing with the sync issue. With sometimes you can experience the audio being out of sync with the person speaking, and you have to troubleshoot that, and it's painful. There's no better way of putting it. It's painfully frustrating, but once you get it worked through, it's fine. But it's a long process and can be very irritating. So how does OBS work? Well, like I said, you connect everything to your laptop or your computer. You open OBS, and then as you start to add devices, it'll automatically recognize that you have a camera connected. If I were to open OBS on my workstation right now, it would recognize my webcam as a source. If I were to plug in another camera, it would recognize that one as well. And essentially what you do is you load each one of those sources in there, and they have a little eyeball next to them. That means that's what your audience is seeing. If you don't want them to see that, you just simply turn it off. And Sarah, we can talk a little bit how to troubleshoot that at the end to help you out, okay? I had to do this for the demo I'm going to show you in just a moment, that I had to work through this to get it worked out. And then OBS talks directly to wherever you want to stream. And then all you do is link those together, start your stream, those two start talking to each other, and you're good to go. And another great thing about OBS is it's just like Zoom. You have the option to record your service directly to your hard drive. Now will this play? Okay. Now this is an example of a setup. I used that Hudley GoPro camera, or that GoPro camera I showed earlier. I used one of those shotgun mics right over the individual's head, and I used OBS to live stream the state of the school address for my son's school. As you can see, I created a nice graphic at the beginning to throw up as people were coming into the live stream, that loading period. This was up for just, where's my mouse? There it is. I'm going to move it up just a little bit so you don't have to sit through this. You can do it.
Good evening, Evansville Day School. Welcome to the 2021 State of the School Address. I wish that we were together here at the campus, but unfortunately for this year, we're going to use the modern technology that we've all become so accustomed with. And for our first time ever, we're going to do the State of the School Address, as you well know, watching right now, as a YouTube live video. And this video will be available after the broadcast as well.
So as you can see, his voice is in sync, but I had to troubleshoot that. The video looks really good. It's compressed because YouTube compresses everything. The audio is very clear. He's very easy to hear. And it looks great. And like I said, this was live streamed with one camera, one microphone, and one laptop. So it's very easy to go from this, which works good, to something like this with very small resources. And I just wanted to show you this as an example of something that was done with this minimalist equipment. Because a lot of people will probably say, oh, one camera, one microphone, you can't do anything with that. And I 100% disagree. You can do something really great with just a camera and a microphone. And it's just a hair better than what you were doing before.
Normally, if we were here on...
Okay. So one thing, and then we're going to get into a lot of questions, and there's going to be a lot of questions because tonight everybody's going to talk about, well, how do we do this option or how do we do this option? And I want to leave plenty of time for those questions. One of the things you're going to run into as you start looking at equipment, as you maybe want to add this, that, whatever, everybody is buying this stuff because everybody's in the same boat. We're in that process of transitioning back into hybrid environments. A lot of equipment is back ordered. So don't be surprised and don't be frustrated. You can always continue to do what you're currently doing. And then two, you can also, if you get one or two pieces in, you can find a way to incorporate that into that next step. And then just kind of weather that out until the other stuff comes in there. Paul, if you want to do actual video editing, there is something called, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. You're looking for DaVinci Resolve, and it's made by Black Magic Design. When you go to their website, Paul, they're going to have two options. They're going to have a free one and a paid one. You want the free one. It's really good. It actually has, I'd say, 75% of the features that the paid version does. When I was teaching video production last year, this is the program that I taught all my students, and it works really well. One more. Okay.
I think you sent that link just to Paul. I don't see it on mine.
Oh, I think I did. Nope, I sent it to Lee. Thank you. So
Good. He
much.
probably knows how to use it.
He might. Yeah. Let's try that again. Oops, I can't even type now.
Well, while Troy's putting that in the chat, just a reminder for those of you who came in a little bit after we started, if you put your name and the name of your church and your email in the chat, I will send you the link for this recording. I will also send you the link for yesterday's recording, which is involves the use of multiple cameras and understanding how to design your space, that kind of thing. So I'm happy to send you both links if you give us your email address.
And if you're nervous about video editing software, the Photos app in Microsoft basic, like Windows, has some basic, put a blank background with some text on it, put a video in, you can cut it into two pieces or you can trim the ends of it, and you can't mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
And it won't kill your computer or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do a lot of basic stuff right there without having to do too fancy of others. If it makes you nervous, that's a nice one just to get started on.
I totally agree with that. And the nice thing about DaVinci Resolve is it's free and it's a higher end video editing software, but Lee hit it right on the head. It's taxing on a computer. It does require you to have some, a pretty good processor, a lot of RAM, a nice graphics card if you want to work through it without it being quirky and crashing. But there are a lot of other options out there. A lot of people use iMovie, but I know you got to have a Mac to use that. But whenever anybody asks me, I say that. One of the questions that came up last night as we were talking is we were talking about different software applications for putting graphics on screen. And one of the things we talked about as well, if that's something you're considering, and a lot of people have been looking at that, is PowerPoint is a great option for doing that as well. And a lot of people overlook that. But a lot of churches are using PowerPoint because they already have Microsoft accounts, in their office setup. There are other options. There's Pro Presenter, which is a great option. There's Media Shop, which is a great option, but they're that additional charge. They're that higher priced option for something you may only be using once a week. But don't forget about PowerPoint as being an option for on-screen graphics as well. So one of the biggest questions I get is what internet speed do we have? Power Director is a good one, Sarah. What internet speed do I need? Most every live streaming software or app website out there, Facebook, YouTube, even Twitch, things of that nature, they're streaming that video signal at about 2.5 megabytes per second, which is a fairly low data rate. We could talk technical about encoders and compression and all that stuff, and I can really make everybody's eyes glass over, but everything's come a long way. And even at 2.5 megabytes per second, you get a really good video quality. So depending on the demand you have in your church on any system, you could, if you've got 15, 20 megabyte per second internet currently in your church, that's plenty of bandwidth to live stream. Okay. The only thing you need to consider is that if you have Wi-Fi and it's an open Wi-Fi and everybody's connected to it and they know the Wi-Fi password, and as soon as they walk in the building, their phones are connecting off of it, you're going to get a little bit of a high demand on that. You may experience some issues when you're moving into that. My biggest recommendation is that if your device can be hardwired to the internet, that's always the best practice. Do you have to? Absolutely not. The event I just showed you a few slides ago from Evansville Day School, I live streamed that through a wireless laptop. My laptop doesn't even have an Ethernet port. So you can do it wirelessly. But again, our church, everybody has the password to the office Wi-Fi, even though they shouldn't. And you can see that. And one of the things I've learned during the pandemic, especially in places where there's a lot of people, I mean, even 30 or 40 people, as soon as they come in, it starts sucking up IP addresses and it causes a little bit of a draw. The big problem with that is that I see time and time again is if you're using Zoom, Zoom has a really hard time with a huge bandwidth draw. And sometimes Zoom even struggles like playing back videos and things of that nature. I'm sure you guys have experienced that being in Zoom meetings and people are constantly getting kicked off, or as you're trying to play a video back, the video pixelates out real bad. That's a Zoom feature. But if you have a higher bit bandwidth, that is something that helps.
Hey, Troy, did you see Bill's a question about,
No.
speaking of using hard cable, how do you feel about them rolling it up? I bet their biceps, their upper body is really strong.
Just make sure you use that over under coil so you don't free it out.
Oh gosh.
But I have seen people do that. You joke about that, but I have seen some people do that. Change the password. I like that. We've done that and people still get it. I don't know how. I guess it's that church mouse we have in our church running around. Okay. Can I use Zoom? Absolutely. Someone asked, I told you we were coming back to this. We're already using it. It's familiar. Your audience can speak and engage with you and with the in-person audience. It allows that interaction that you guys are looking for. And what's really great about being a small space is that it makes it a little bit easier because you don't have people 30 rows back trying to talk to somebody that's like on a monitor up there. It's great. As I mentioned earlier, Zoom does have a little bandwidth quirks every once in a while, and it can be kind of frustrating, but if you know how to troubleshoot those steps, you can easily work through it. One of the big things that I always recommend to people who are using Zoom all the time, if you're playing a video back, just ask everybody to turn their camera off while the video is playing. Everybody's camera here is sucking up the bandwidth for this Zoom meeting. Our conference just had their annual meeting 2 weeks ago, and I produced all the worship videos for those meetings. And that's what we did. We told everybody when we start our worship, please turn your cameras off. We didn't have any issues. That's one little tip I can give it to you. Oh, Lee's saying you roll it from your sanctuary 50 feet every Sunday. And what's really great too about OBS is that OBS can integrate with Zoom to still live stream to YouTube and Facebook and see Zoom as a source. So if you want to have 15 people in your Zoom meeting that are in their homes, along with the people in your sanctuary, you can still live stream this and still have it out there as a hybrid worship experience for that church shopper. So Zoom is a very, 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 very good viable option for incorporating in your live stream. And the nice thing is with Zoom, you've got that camera. And what I will say about this is too, bear this in mind. If you're using your laptop to control Zoom, that camera on your laptop could be your wide shot camera in the back of your sanctuary. So now you've already got your one wide shot camera of your entire sanctuary on that, some microphones running for people to ask questions, engage with them, and then that's connected to maybe a television monitor or something else in your computer or in your sanctuary, and then one other camera on your minister, and you're good to go. So that just dawned on me. Yep, absolutely. Lee's talking about that right there. Lee, do you want to talk about that a little bit since you have more experience with that?
But if you put an external webcam on your laptop, but you've also got the one that's built in looking at you, you can switch back and forth in Zoom, like down where it says stop video and there's a little up icon. You can click there and you can change cameras. So when we do Zoom during prayer time, I can have it personal where I'm one of the faces in the Brady Bunch for those in Zoom. But then the rest of the time I can switch it to the webcam that's sitting on the front of the pulpit that sees the whole sanctuary. And all I have to do is just toggle between the two.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lee, for sharing that, because that's something I forget about every once in a while, but that is a great resource for doing that.
And while we think about Stacy's question, we want to remind folks that ultimately, I think our greater goal, the greater good, is allowing the people in the church to interface with the people who are worshiping at home or attending Bible study at home. That's our ultimate goal. But we realize that you might get there in steps and phases.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, you'll want to ask these questions like Stacy just asked, and go ahead, Troy, if you want to address Stacy's question about how can the people in the sanctuary see the people at home and so on.
Yeah, hear and see. Well, what you would need to do is, what you could do is, one option is if you're live streaming to YouTube and using Zoom as a source and another camera as a source through OBS, privacy issues. Yeah, I get that. You would just have to tell people, if you're here, we're live streaming, and they'll just know. That's something you got to work through on your end about how you feel comfortable with that. From the technical aspect of answering you of how you pull that off, to see, you could, let me think about this real quick. Depending on your setup, there might be a way to go out of your laptop with a signal from just the Zoom, so you only see it in-house. I would have to have your laptop or computer and that sort of thing to kind of navigate that. And then Lee's providing some support on that. As far as hearing them, you could buy like a Yamaha speaker. It's just a USB speaker that you can talk into, and it actually responds at the same time. My son's school used that for that hybrid experience as well. They're less than $100, so that would give the, and I like that too. We stopped Facebook live streaming just before prayer requests. What we've started doing in our church is we send out our prayer list via email and on a handout, but we don't say anyone's name during the worship service anymore, unless we have their permission to. We specifically ask them that.
So a lot of questions in the chat specific to using different cameras, and can you do it with Blackmagic to Zoom? Miles is asking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me scroll up here. Yeah, this is where it's all going to get kind of heavy and technical. And that's fine. Let's see. We saw Facebook Live just for streaming. Can you do it? Can you do it with Blackmagic to Zoom? Miles, when you say Blackmagic, what do you mean specifically?
Or is he talking OBS?
Yeah, he may be. Blackmagic is a manufacturer of software and equipment, so that's why I wanted him to clarify. He may be mic'd or may not even have a mic tonight.
That's what I'm talking about.
What's that?
The Blackmagic, the web designer, because I'm looking to purchase that because I have everything but the capabilities of live streaming, and my church wants me to basically do it through Zoom. So I can link them both together to do it. Because one camera, I just need the rest of the setup for it. I have the sounds, I have mics, I have everything. That's all I'm missing. So if I can link the two together, that's what I'm looking to do.
Okay, what Blackmagic piece of equipment are you getting? Do you know the model name?
No, they didn't send me the model name.
Well, I tell you what, Miles, I tell you what I'm going to do for everyone too. And I did this early last night, but I didn't tonight.
Troy's gonna put his contact
I'm gonna put my
information.
email in the chat. Miles, that'll be one of those things that if you can get that information and send me a message via email, I'm happy to help you kind of work through that steps, if that's okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the other thing, folks, is one of the things that I am doing is I'm gifting. I'm making my own Troy Vaupel gift certificate for our church, and gifting some time so that when people run into problems, they can contact Troy and hire his services. But he's going to give you his contact info there for a quick question, maybe. But
Mhm.
also, you may find that you need some more information down the road. We are also willing to bring Troy or someone else back to you as you learn more and want to do more.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've done tons of seminars, and if it's something that it's a very simple question that, like you said, you just simply say, hey, I'm getting this piece of equipment and how do I connect it to this, or how do these two play well together? And it's really simple to handle over an email. I'm happy to do that.
Oh,
But if it is something that requires a little bit more, then we can just have a conversation about what do we need to do on that end. But I'm happy to respond to emails offline. And like I said, if they're easily addressed, it's no worries. I'm happy to offer those, because this is hard. This is really hard. It's hard for everybody, regardless of if you're doing a small setup or a large one. It's new, it's out of our comfort zone. And as I talked about last night, even as a working pro who's done this for over 20 years, when I started doing the live stream thing and learning about all these different words and terms and this and that, there were times I felt really overwhelmed too. So you're not alone. And it's good to keep in mind, like Kris said just a few moments ago, we're building to something, and where we start doesn't have to be where we're trying to go. And because honestly, it's going to change. There's new equipment that's going to come out every day. It's going to get easier. It's going to get simpler. And if you take your time moving through this, you're going to be much more better off, because you're not going to stress yourself out. You're not going to get fatigued from trying to do it. And yeah. So another question I get to is, can I continue to use my phone and tablet? Of course. If it's not broke, don't try and fix it. You may decide that, oh gosh, going to this may not be the right choice for our congregation right now. We don't want to rush to it. Everyone in our congregation loves what we're doing during the pandemic. They're not really receptive right now of moving into a different layout, a different format. And also too, there are ways to connect your iPhone or your tablet to your computer as a source. I don't have experience doing that, but I read some articles on today that said with a lot of devices that you can actually plug your iPhone in via your lightning cable to a computer, and it can recognize that as just a camera source. And they make really inexpensive holders for phones. I have one, it costs $20. So you could potentially use your iPhone as a potential camera as well. And there we go. That's where I was talking about. I know it feels really overwhelming. I know that, but it's okay. Relax and breathe. Sometimes things are going to go wrong on a Sunday, and that happens. Don't worry about it. Work the problem or the problems. And the big thing I like to tell everybody when we speak to them, this is a new ministry. And that's how I envision it in our church. And I'd like to share that with other congregations and conferences as well. One of the things we talked about last night is, we had one person join this past Sunday that we found during the pandemic that found us on YouTube. This is a great way to spread the work of your church. And it's a great way to reach out for that active church shopper who's not yet ready to come into the house of worship and get that hard sell approach about joining the church. But they're looking for a way to learn about your church in a comfortable environment. And one of the things I didn't mention last night, but I want to mention tonight is that due to the pandemic, we've all gotten really comfortable with worshiping at our convenience. We're all used to Monday afternoon, I've got a break in my meetings, I'm just going to watch our worship. Or Tuesday night, I've got my pajamas on, the kids are in bed, I can sit and listen to the sermon in peace and quiet. It's going to take a long time before people get out of that habit and enjoying that luxury of viewing whenever they want. So this is still a great option for them. And one of the things that I found too within our congregation is that we have a lot of older members that are starting to come back to in-person worship, but then they're watching the worship again during the week. So you're seeing a lot of members who are just, they can't get enough church right now. So all of these things add up to a new ministry effort and new ways to market your church as well, because you can encourage your congregation to check in and say, hey, watch us on our website or watch us on YouTube, that sort of thing. And it's really good. Chrissy, good question. We talked about this last night just a little bit. Computer specs, as far as like massive specs, I don't have those, but any computer made in the past 5-6 years, totally fine to run OBS. It's not a big piece of software. It doesn't take a lot of resources to run it. And if you Google it, when you go to download it and pull up spec requirements, they'll give it to you there. But it's not a big install and it doesn't take a lot to run it. And
What other
that's all I
questions?
have on the presentation. So
What other questions do you have for Troy, specific to your situation or your setup, or general questions?
Bill just said right there, OBS is running on my 12-year-old laptop.
There we go.
Thank you, Bill.
How do you feel about lapel mics?
I love lapel mics.
Yeah, because I have like 5 of them, so.
Yeah, I love lapel mics. The only thing I run into with lapel mics is the person putting them on. You just want to make sure that they get it in a position that's going to catch that sound. Like when I was talking to Lee earlier, depending on what type of lapel mic you have and that pickup range is, if they've got a cardioid mic on and it's facing over here and they're talking here, you're not going to get as much quality. You want to make sure it's here. But I love lapel mics. Our minister uses the on the ear. Yeah, it has really good sound quality, and that's just what she prefers. So yeah, but lapel mics are great. Okay, so like,
Troy, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, and then I'm going to read Laura's. Go ahead.
So you were talking about like cameras that are kind of statically placed, right? That they're focused in one direction with the possibility of zooming in and out. Is it worth considering trying to have someone who is like changing camera angles, or is that kind of overthinking it and overworking it?
No, I think Heather, that's a great idea, because when you start moving into those cameras that have a remote control that you can move them, that's where you start getting into that little bit higher price bracket. They make cameras that you can control with a joystick. And if you watch last night's seminar, we talk about those devices. But I mean, they're not super expensive, but between one camera and a controller, you're around $2,200. So that's an investment. So to answer your question, absolutely. You can just have someone over there, and when it's time to maybe move that camera over this bit, you just have somebody watching them and you're looking at the monitor and you just say, hey, turn it this way. And as they turn it, you just give them a thumbs up. And that's how that works. If you watch like the news or something like that, they're talking to somebody through a headset and there's somebody with the camera and they are panning it back and forth and they are tilting it up and down. So no, you're not overthinking it at all. And you're thinking of a way of how do I start with just that one camera and get through a while to we're in a space where we might be able to get a second camera, and how do we get the most out of it? I applaud that and I love that. You're just trying to be the most resourceful you can with the resources you have. And I've actually done that before on a couple of live streams where I've had it just close enough that I can reach up there and tweak it. So that's a great question and a good way to think.
And Heather, I just want to jump in. Several other speakers we've heard have talked about the fact that we are inclined to want to hide cameras so they don't interfere with the look in the sanctuary. And Jim Keat from Convergence says, don't hide the cameras. Go ahead and have somebody move a camera. Let people see the camera so they see that it's part of the culture. You know, in the old days, babies were in the crying room. Well, now they're, you know, crawling all over. I think the idea of showing cameras, going ahead and having somebody adjust the camera, talking to the people who are at home, making that part of the culture of change is not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't mean, you know, you don't have to be slick to be effective and connective.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And I know it tends to be the tendency that we want to be kind of having this going on as like a fly on the wall and that sort of thing. But I think you're right. I think that is a better mindset. And I'll be honest with you. I try to do everything when I'm directing our live worship on Sundays as if though nobody can notice it's going on. And I think that's the wrong mindset to have. You're certainly not going to get people who want to help support this ministry if they don't know what's going on. And also too, that kind of addresses that concern about people feeling uncomfortable about being on camera and stuff like that, because if they don't know what's going on, then they might overshare. But if they're not comfortable with it, they may, you know, sit in the back or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So somebody asked Laura.
Okay, we have Laura, and then we have Kirsten, and then a couple of suggestions. So let's go to Laura and then Kirsten.
Yeah, so are there any potential feedback problems from running Zoom in worship? Currently, we mute everyone in our online worship except for the person speaking. Feedback typically happens most often when you have a microphone close to a speaker source. So if your microphone or whatever's playing back the audio from the people in the Zoom meeting on your computer, if you get a little too close to the microphone, that's where you start to get that feedback sound. So you should be okay. Certainly test it a couple of times as you're doing it. And if it happens, just see what makes it worse and see what makes it better.
And then Kirsten's, if we're going to continue to use Zoom along with one extra camera, what kinds of cords and cables do we need to allow interaction between those online and those in person?
That is all dependent on the device you get. Someone asked earlier about the Hudley camera. Did it use USB-C or USB-A? I misspoke. It does not use USB-C. It uses USB mini into the camera, and then you could use a typical USB on the back end. Those are always device specific. Some cameras, you know, depending on what camera you get, microphone you get, that sort of thing, you're going to be looking for a lot of USB and microphone cables and Ethernet cables. But those specific types really depend on what options you consider.
And Kirsten, I think Kirsten, somebody from your church was in last night's workshop. Do you know that if that's true? Anyway, they may have gotten a lot more technical information last night.
Mm-hmm. And then Lee said we make sure people can see, you know, where to wave to those on Zoom. And then Bill said we mute everyone when worship starts. The host makes anyone host who can speak a co-host. These are all great suggestions. Thank you. And then the website I just dropped in the chat, which I think I just sent it to Chrissy. I don't know why my thing keeps defaulting to just one person.
Well, that's okay. Chrissy, you're in charge next seminar.
Right.
So
I'm going to drop a resource site into the chat. It's called BH Photo Video. It is a large video sales company out of New York. It's one of the world's largest equipment retail companies. They're very competitive on their price. They have good shipping rates. What's huge about them is that if you buy something from them, you get 30 days to try it out. And if you don't like it, you can send it back. That's it's like on 95% of the stuff they have. Another thing that's really great about them is they have tremendous online chat support. So if you have that specific question about what type of cables do I need? How does this perform in this? They have experts in each area that can chat to you about it. It's a great place to start looking if you're looking for equipment. You don't necessarily have to buy from them, but it is a great resource to go and do research on. And then real quickly, as we're waiting for more questions.
Laura Fisk has a question. Thanks, Laura.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Yes, I have a question about, because this is hybrid worship, and I guess my question about the muting is a little bit longer, but we're trying to make it more interactive, especially for the people who are still at home or going to stay there. I mean, we can put them up on a screen. Like, what do you have any suggestions of how they can stay interactive? But it's hard with tech, because we're going to hear everything that everybody else is hearing. We don't want to just see, but like want to be able to give people the capability of interaction with people there and people at home, people giving them a little bit more freedom, I would think. But at some point, if everybody's unmuting and it's going to be a
free for all.
disaster.
Yeah.
It is a free for all. It really is.
What are some suggestions on making it interactive but control the chaos, I guess?
When we started this months ago, I had an interesting phone conversation with Kirsten Linford, and she was saying that she was really trying to be intentional about what pieces, what phases, what chunks, she was more artful in her description of worship, would be made available on Zoom. That she was telling me she just wasn't sure that you just drop the whole service into Zoom, because things translate better. And so I remember having that conversation with her. And so I think that lends itself to this question. Is it just a free for all and on both sides, or do you limit and control when people are interfacing with each other, just as you would during a live service? I don't know. Troy, thoughts about that?
I'm almost done. Sorry, my 9-year-old's coming in to photobomb me. Questions about that? I don't know, because currently at our church, because we're a larger church, we're just doing kind of that live stream. Hey, welcome everybody. We're glad you're joining us, whether you're in person or just watching us online. We have not moved into the trying to speak directly or get that online worship, online viewer engaged in our congregation as how we hold worship, which we need to be moving those steps now that we've got the tech issue worked out. From a technical standpoint, what I can tell you is, depending on the equipment you have, there are ways to, connect a monitor, whether it's your Zoom to a bigger monitor, whether it's just the Zoom meeting, whether it's the full live stream. So as things are going on and say we were using this along with the camera in the live stream, and we decided that during Laura's question, we were going to put her full screen in the live stream. Whatever you send to the live stream is what's going to show up on your monitor in your house of worship. There are a lot of different ways of doing that. And you can also use video splitters as well, where you could have a camera coming in and it sends it to 2 sources. So you could actually send a signal directly out of your computer that just sends the Zoom meeting to a monitor. That takes a little bit more configuring, but you could do that. What makes that a nice option is that people who are in the Zoom meeting who don't want to be on screen during the live stream, they're only seen in-house, but not virtually online. That you can totally do that. It takes a little bit more of that finagling based on what you have in-house, but that's an option as well.
And
but I think
Laura,
it's incredible that you're trying to do that.
Yeah, some churches are having, somebody with a handheld camera standing at the front door of the church with a little TV monitor so people can see and be seen. But it strikes me, Troy, that might be the next workshop.
It might be.
It's one thing to to do the Zoom church and then to live stream. But our big goal is to provide the hybrid opportunity that honors both groups of participants. And so, thinking out loud, 2 things, I'm inviting people to send us suggestions and requests for the kinds of trainings that you'd like to have. But I do think that down the road here, that might be the next technical piece.
Is how to incorporate that. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I have not heard of anybody specifically asking questions about how to do that. Most people are kind of like how we're talking about the presentation today. It's and I wondered about that, because when we first started talking about doing these types of workshops, it was earlier when people were just pre-recording, but nobody really understood what we needed to do live stream. Now that you guys have caught up so quickly and you guys have done such a fantastic job implementing these things, and you're starting to get beyond the, well, I know I need a camera in this, but I want to know how I can get people at home engaged with what we're doing in person and ministry, provide ministry work to everyone. And, how do I get that feedback from people who are at home and have them feel connected and engaged, just like the people who are physically in the pews are? And like I said, in our church, we haven't had that conversation yet. I've thought about it, but I'm wondering, how do we do that? And what are those next steps? And I was a part of I led a webinar a couple of months ago, and one of our ministers who gave a testimonial about it, she spoke to that, very closely. And at that point, what they were doing was, when they were live streaming to YouTube, they had someone designated in the YouTube chat to talk to people and post messages in the YouTube chat and encourage people to maybe provide prayer requests, kind of to engage with them, have them give, comments, feedbacks, that sort of thing. And they were sending those to the minister to maybe talk to and things of that nature. So if you're live streaming to YouTube or Facebook, if you have that option of someone who's sitting there, who their only job during the worship service is to monitor that social media chat and then provide that information to your minister when they want to speak to them, that's a good option as well. And that's really the best way to do it. I mean, you have that moderator who's always seeing what's going on in the chat, and you could easily mention somebody in a prayer request or that sort of thing. So that's a really good option as well, as have somebody working that chat, and somebody who's constantly posting, learn more about our church at this website, learn more about this ministry opportunity at this website, and that sort of thing.
And I'm jotting down your suggestions in the chat, and thank you for that. And we will be doing our best to try and find somebody to bring some of this to you, and taking advantage of the suggestions you have, and maybe some of the folks you're volunteering who aren't even in the meeting. So so that's good too. Any last questions or thoughts for Troy on this Friday afternoon? Yes.
I'd like to jump in just on the discussion that we've been having just now. My
Sure.
philosophy has been to do things as simply as possible and still have the human connection.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a couple of where the ability for people out there to talk to us has been important. And all I've done is set up my laptop computer, run a cord out of the microphone into a little speaker that has a volume control on it.
Mm-hmm.
And for the parts of the service where we want them to interact, we turn it up. And for the other parts, we turn it down and they can talk to each other. Also, that moderator you're talking about does not have to be in the room for Zoom. That can be a ministry of somebody who's not able to come to church.
Yeah. Yeah. Great ideas, Paul. Thank you for
that. That is wonderful. Very wonderful.
We're gonna ask you for a picture of that. And at the next time we get together, you're one of our guest speakers, buddy.
Okay, got it.
Anybody else? Thank you for taking a Friday afternoon. If you've put your email in the chat, I'm going to send you this recording and last night's, which is far more technical. It also talks a little bit more about the PTZ cameras, where you can do a little bit more. And then I will be doing my best to see how we can bring you the next iteration, which is, okay, how do we talk to each other? And I'll just be, calling somebody smarter than me, which won't be hard. So thank
Kris,
you
if
all.
I
Go
can
ahead,
intercede
Troy.
real quick.
Yeah.
There was one question in here that I wanted to answer that I think would be beneficial for everyone. And it's from Karen Stewart. She asked, are most churches using volunteer members to run the equipment during worship, or employing professionals to do it? That's a wonderful question. We talked about that a little bit last night, and I want to address that while everybody's here. It is a huge mixture based on who's willing to be a part of it. And I noticed that someone else made a comment too about they don't have a lot of tech volunteers in their church. I can speak to this directly. At my church, which has about 165 members, about 165 who attend worship every week, probably 250 members. We have two people on our tech team. There's me, and there's the retired gentleman who runs the audio board at present. We're working on growing that ministry work to get more people involved. Like I said, with our church, we have 4 cameras, we have graphics, we have an audio board. You know, we have a lot more resources. It'd be great to have a lot of people to just divvy that workload up. We're trying to identify how to get more people involved. The conversations I've had with other churches, the things I've troubleshoot is try to get the youth involved in it. Youth love tech. It's a great way to get your youth involved in your ministry work, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the youth involved in serving the church. They're not scared of tech. They love tech. Reach out to them. If you have a college or a tech school near you, reach out to them and see if there's anybody there who's a student that's probably had some video production experience that would be willing to come in and do it, maybe for 10 or 15 bucks a worship service, or maybe to volunteer. Those are good resources as well. But really encourage your congregation to take this on, really encourage them to be a part of this. I mean, but hope that answers that. But, you know, I'm seeing a huge mixture of it. A lot of churches around here, they put a tech team together like in, you know, late last fall, and that team has worked through the whole process from picking stuff up to installing it. So that team has learned everything along the way, so they feel comfortable running it. Whereas if you're trying to get people in on the back end, they get intimidated and nervous. And I think as time goes on, more people will get confident.
Okay, friends. Troy, I'll be in touch with you next week. Thank you very much. And thanks for making yourself available to these folks for a quick question or maybe an extended work relationship. Y'all, I'm taking email addresses. I'm making my own email list. So whenever we have anything related to this, I'm going to send you direct info, and keep those cards and letters coming. We're going to do our best to bring you the next session as soon as we can. Okay?
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Good night.
weekend.
Kris, I'm trying to make you the host again, and it won't.
You don't need to. You can just say goodnight, Gracie, and I will too.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Dawn.
Thanks, Kris.